Gloria Trevi, dubbed the Mexican Madonna, had an onstage persona that of a provocateur, always pushing the boundaries with her style, sexuality, and attitude. To her fans, she was a music icon. To her critics, she was a criminal. Gloria Trevi's story is one of the most unbelievable in Latin pop history. On stage, she performed with controlled chaos and an astonishing vocal performance, reminiscent of pop rock and traditional pop music of the 80s and 90s. She became instantly recognizable for her messy hair, ripped jeans, barefoot performances, and brightly colored outfits. Behind the rebellious anthems and glittery pop success was a darker story than anyone could have imagined. Overshadowed by multiple controversies, cult accusations, and even suggestions of child endangerment, Gloria Trevi's journey would prove that sending a shockwave often meant shocking those who thought they couldn't even be shocked. Against all odds, she reinvented herself as both a survivor and an icon, adored by fans, embraced by the LGBTQ+ community, and still questioned by critics who wonder if she ever fully told the truth about her controversial past. This is the life of Gloria Trevi, the story of a woman who went from selling millions to becoming a national villain, and then somehow rebuilding herself into one of the most controversial and enduring figures in Latin music history. Gloria Trevi, born Gloria de Los Ángeles Treviño Ruiz, was born on February 15, 1968, in Monterrey, Nuevo León, a bustling industrial city in northern Mexico. She grew up in what she later described as a strict Catholic household, middle class and traditional, where discipline and modesty were expected. Her mother wanted her to be a proper señora, but even as a little girl, Gloria didn't quite fit the mold. Friends from Monterrey remember her as shy but restless, always humming melodies under her breath or scribbling down poems in her notebooks. She loved to dance and perform in front of the mirror, rehearsing routines that no one else ever saw. By her teens, she was certain Monterrey was too small for her dreams. Like many ambitious young Mexicans in the 1980s, she set her sights on Mexico City, the epicenter of music, TV, and culture. But arriving there was nothing like the glamorous pop star fantasized. She lived in tiny, cheap apartments, sometimes skipping meals to save money, and worked odd jobs just to get by. In interviews, she once joked that she survived on tortillas and soda. During her early years, hustling auditions anywhere she could. She even auditioned for commercials and talent shows, but was often rejected for being too intense or too unconventional. That raw, unpolished energy, which later became her trademark, didn't fit the polished image Televisa wanted for its teen stars. One of her earliest breaks came when she joined the girl group Boquitas Pintadas in 1985, put together by none other than Sergio Andrade, the man who would later become both her mentor and, infamously, her downfall. Gloria didn't last long in the group, but even in grainy VHS clips of those early performances, you can see the seeds of her rebellion. While the other girls smiled sweetly in coordinated outfits, Gloria was already experimenting with messier hair, sharper movements, and a fiercer stage presence. These years of hunger, rejection, and resilience would harden her, shaping the stubborn determination that became central to her career. Gloria's first big break came in 1985 when she joined a brand new girl group called Boquitas Pintadas, or Painted Little Mouths. The mastermind behind it, a rising producer named Sergio Andrade. We'll revisit him later in the video. Andrade pitched the group as Mexico's answer to Menudo and Madonna-era bubblegum pop. Five young women, bright outfits, upbeat songs, and choreography rehearsed to perfection. The original lineup was Maria Raquel Portillo, or Maria Boquitas. She was positioned as the group's lead vocalist. She had the most polished voice, which Andrade highlighted. We also had Monica Zavala, focused on backing vocals and harmonies. Pilar Romero, known for her dancing and image appeal more than lead vocals. and Diana Torres, another backing vocalist and dancer, positioned by the label as, quote, the pretty one. Finally, we have Gloria Trevi. At the time, she was just another supporting member with raw energy but no polish. She wasn't Andrade's focus yet, but her wildness stood out, even if it clashed with the group's polished choreography. The group signed with Musart Records, a label known at the time for cranking out pop and ballad acts. They released one self-titled album, Boquitas Pintadas, in 1985. On paper, it had all the right ingredients: a sugary lead single called Amor de Primavera, Spring Love, the peppy Chicos Chicos, or Boys Boys, and a handful of synth-driven tracks that borrowed heavily from international pop trend. But the reception was lukewarm. The singles barely charted, and after a few TV appearances, including spots on Siempre en el Domingo or Always on Sunday, Mexico's biggest music variety show, the label realized that the project wasn't clicking with audiences. Musart quietly dropped the group within a year. For Gloria, this was eye-opening. She later said that she never felt at home in the glossy, choreographed image, quote, no era yo, or it wasn't me. Where the other girls embraced the synchronized moves and polished vocals, Gloria craved chaos and authenticity. Still, those short 2 years were a crash course in the music industry. She learned how labels could hype you one day and drop you the next. She learned what it meant to record in the studio, to wear costumes you hated, and to plaster on a smile even when you felt like an imposter. She gained one lifelong connection, though, her friendship with Maria Boquitas. The two bonded quickly, rehearsing late night, and that friendship would keep Maria in Gloria's orbit for years to come, for better and, tragically, for worse. When Boquitas Pintadas fizzled, some members quit music altogether. After the breakup, Maria stayed in music sporadically, later reuniting with Andrade, a decision that would tie her fate into the darkest chapters of Gloria's story. Today, she's rebuilding her career as a singer and a podcast host. Monica Zavala left the industry after the group disbanded, living a largely private life outside of the spotlight. Pilar Romero drifted into local modeling and eventually exited entertainment completely. Diana Torres left the industry and is rarely mentioned in retrospective. Gloria, though, wasn't ready to give up. She was broke, frustrated, and unsure if she even belonged in the industry. But she had one card left to play, reconnecting with the man that had created the group in the first place, Sergio Andrade. When Boquitas Pintadas fell apart, Gloria faced the harsh reality of the industry. No label, no money, and little direction. But she knew one man who might still hold the key to her dreams, Sergio Andrade. Andrade himself was a complicated figure. In the late 1970s, he tried to make it as a pop singer and pianist, even realizing his own records. But he never broke through. Audiences found him talented but forgettable, overshadowed by the bigger stars of the era. His stage name briefly floated around the charts, but by the mid-80s, his career as a performer was pretty much over. Rather than give up, Andrade reinvented himself as a behind-the-scenes mastermind. He had a keen musical ear, knew how to arrange songs, and above all, he understood how to package artists from Mexico's biggest label like Musart, Televisa's music division, and eventually BMG Areola. He started writing jingles, coaching young singers, and presenting himself as a star maker. By the mid-80s, Andrade had developed a reputation in the industry as both brilliant and manipulative. He was eccentric, a perfectionist who demanded total control of his artist's image, style, and even personal lives. Some saw him as Mexico's answer to a Phil Spector type, a failed performer who poured all his energy into molding others. When Gloria reconnected with him in 1988, she was just another broke 20-year-old with big dreams. But Andrade saw something different. Where others saw a scrappy, awkward girl, Sergio saw raw material. He told her point blank, "We're not going to make you another pop princess." Mexico already had polished idols like Lucerito and Thalia. Andrade's vision was radical for his time. He wanted Gloria to become the anti-pop star, the Mexican Madonna. Instead of smoothing her edges, he amplified them. Messy hair, ripped jeans, bright clothing, a shocking contrast to the gowns and perfect curls of Televisa's sweethearts. Gloria wasn't going to just sing. She was going to scream, stomp, contort on stage, and provoke. Andrade positioned her as a walking contradiction, both relatable to the youth who felt alienated by Mexico's conservative culture and scandalous enough to draw endless media attention. For Gloria, it was a revelation. For Sergio, it was a redemption. He had failed as a star himself, but through Gloria Trevi, he would create one. And in 1989, that gamble paid off when Gloria released her debut solo album called ¿Qué hago aquí? Or What Do I Do Here? Under BMG Areola. In 1989, Gloria Trevi exploded onto the Mexican music scene with her debut album. The record introduced her signature blend of pop rock rebellion and playful mischief. Its breakthrough single, Dr. Psiquiatra or Dr. Psychiatrist, became an anthem. The story of a girl confessing her, quote, madness to a psychiatrist, both mocking and reclaiming the way women have often been labeled as circle and unlike anything on the Mexican television at the time. On stage, Trevi performed barefoot with ripped stockings, shaking her hair wildly, sometimes crawling on the floor. Where the reigning pop queens wore ball gowns and smiled politely, Gloria stomped, screamed, and smirked. Within weeks, she was being dubbed La Chica con el pelo suelto, or the girl with the wild, untamed hair. But Gloria wasn't just rebellion for rebellion's sake. In interviews, she began talking openly about women's rights in ways few mainstream artists dared.
¿Contra del aborto, Gloria?
Te voy a ser sincera, porque no tengo pelos en la lengua y pues ni modo, me estaba haciendo la pregunta. Yo soy una gente que adoro la vida y respeto hasta la vida de una cucaracha aunque me das asco, ¿sí? Pero yo creo que una mujer tiene el derecho de decidir hacer con su cuerpo lo que quiera. Porque si los hombres quedaran embarazados, a mí se me hace que el aborto ya estaría permitido y legalizado.
Es decir, ¿tú crees que hay una sociedad muy machista?
She defended a woman's right to abortion, questioned religious conservatism, and once quipped that men feared her because she was, quote, una mujer con cerebro, or a woman with brains. She even caused outrage by saying she believed that women had the same right to bodily autonomy as men, remarks that the Catholic leaders denounced, but young women cheered. Her second album, Tu Ángel de la Guarda, or Your Guardian Angel, elevated her from rising star to cultural phenomenon. The hit single, Pelo Suelto, or Loose Hair, wasn't just a pop track, it was a manifesto. With lyrics about wearing her hair loose, being free, breaking rules, Gloria gave Mexico's youth, especially teenage girls, permission to rebel against expectation. She became the face of liberation on TV shows across Latin America, turning her messy hair and defiant look into a marketing tool. And Trevi knew how to shock beyond the music. She posed for calendars in provocative outfits, torn jeans, skimpy tops, her hair wild and untamed, and they sold out nationwide. She starred in ad campaigns with condoms as fashion accessories, draping them over her clothes or pulling them on stage to promote safe sex. In the early 90s Mexico, where even talking about contraception on television was taboo, Gloria was dismantling boundaries with a wink and a grin. Her third album, Más Turbada que Nunca in 1992, pushed the envelope even further. The title itself was a pun, translating loosely as more disturbed than ever, but also cheekily alluding to sexual arousal. Songs like Zapatos Viejos, or Old Shoes, showed her playful, rebellious humor. Gloria Trevi had become Mexico's ultimate provocateur, a barefoot, hair-flinging, condom-waving rockera who wasn't afraid to scream about taboo subjects on national TV. She was selling out arenas, topping the Latin charts, and her fan base spanned everyone from teenage rebels to working-class housewives who found catharsis in her defiance. But while her public persona was fearless and untouchable, behind the stage lights, a darker reality was beginning to take root, one tied to her relationship with Sergio Andrade. By the early 1990s, Gloria Trevi was no longer just a star. She had exploded into a phenomenon. Albums like Tu Ángel de la Guarda and Más Turbada que Nunca had sold millions. Her concerts drew arena-sized crowds, and she was headlining tours not just in Mexico, but across Latin America and into the United States. For a while, she seemed untouchable, but behind the curtain of her rebellious image, a very different world was taking shape, one centered on her manager and producer, Sergio Andrade. On the surface, Andrade was presented as the architect of Trevi's success, a genius producer who molded her into Mexico's anti-pop idol. But as Gloria's fame grew, Andrade built what came to be known in the media as, quote, the Trevi-Andrade clan. Essentially, this clan was described as a talent training academy, a place where young girls could audition, join, and supposedly learn dance, music, and performance under Sergio's guidance. Dozens of teenagers, some as young as 12 or 13, were drawn in by the premise of stardom, often encouraged by their parents who believed they were giving their daughters a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But later testimony would paint a very different picture. According to multiple former members, what seemed like a training program was in fact a tightly controlled world of sexual and physical abuse designed by Andrade. The girls lived under strict rules and under the same roof. They were isolated from their families, denied proper food and medical care, and subjected to intense psychological manipulation. Former member Eileen Hernandez later revealed in her memoir that Andrade would use Gloria herself to convince girls to stay at the academy, telling them that she herself was living proof that Sergio's methods worked. In some accounts, Gloria would reassure new recruits that Sergio was brilliant, that he was misunderstood, and that obedience would one day lead them to fame. 13-year-old Eileen Hernandez, who, under the premise of wanting to learn how to dance and sing, met Gloria Trevi, the singer who recruited her and told her that she was at a perfect age to join the academy. 2 weeks later, Eileen went to the quote-unquote school to audition for Sergio Andrade. She describes her audition as ugly, horrendous, and bleak. Her mom accompanied her to the audition and even waited for her in the living room. Eileen auditioned for Sergio, and Gloria was next to him for most of the audition. Gloria then asked 13-year-old Eileen to another room where she says Eileen needs to undress to complete the audition because Sergio needs to see which parts of her body need work. Eileen refused and ended the audition right there. Eileen later attended classes at Sergio's office twice a week for months, enduring many forms of harassment. Gloria would often pull her out of the classes and would verbally berate her about how Sergio was a strong, mysterious, and wounded man. She convinced Eileen that he was a good man and that Eileen's mission was to make him believe in love again, grooming Eileen for Sergio. Gloria told her that Sergio would make her famous. After months of coercion and fear of losing the opportunity to train and enter stardom, Eileen was coerced into having sex with him at the age of 14. He was 34. Gloria made her swear not to tell her parents under the guise of her parents not understanding the relationship, normalizing the abuse. He would eventually go on to marry her at the age of 15. Sergio would then travel with a string of women, mainly teenage girls from the ages of 12 to 14, with him from place to place, often being spotted at various hotels and outings with the girls. Eventually, another victim came forward with allegations of sexual and physical abuse. In 1995, 16-year-old Lupita Carrasco first met Gloria and Sergio. Gloria used the guise of casting girls for a Mexican telenovela to lure and attract 16-year-old Lupita. The supposed casting was held in a nearby hotel. Sergio offered her a 2-week course where training would take place in Sergio's home in a wealthy part of the city in Mexico called Morelos. Unbeknownst to Lupita, the compound contained 7 other girls, some as young as 13. Sergio and Gloria lived there. Lupita describes the house being adorned with barbed wire and high walls. Because of Lupita's socioeconomic status and desperation to escape poverty, the course meant some financial freedom for her and her family. Sergio offered her money and encouragement for the completion of training. As a part of the alleged abuse, Lupita recounts being tricked into thinking she had upset Sergio. Under the instruction of Gloria, Lupita would write a letter professing her love to Sergio, which she did not feel and was forced to write. Failure to do so would result in being kicked out of the house. Fearing being kicked out, she wrote the letter under Gloria's guidance. After receiving the letter, Sergio felt pleased and raped her that night. While the letter composition seemed like another form of psychological manipulation to Lupita, it would be revealed later in testimony that the love letters were used as evidence for, quote, signs of consent. These letters would be used against the young girls as proof that they were not victims. The abuse continued after and was the requirement for the girls being there. He made Lupita do hard manual labor. He often refused them food and bare necessities, oftentimes forcing the girls to sleep on the floor without blankets, depriving them of food or water, and subjecting the girls to sexual and physical abuse. At one point, Sergio had purchased 5 houses next to each other in the same neighborhood and began constructing a compound along with the cult. On one occasion, at one of his beach houses, one of the 14-year-old girls tried to escape. She swam in the ocean hoping to liberate herself, and unfortunately was captured. As a form of punishment, Sergio beat her until she was bleeding and lifeless. He locked her in a bathroom for 3 weeks naked, no food or clothing. What makes the accusation more disturbing is the marketing surrounding Gloria's image at the time. During the abuse allegations and before media mainstream success, Trevi's audience was mainly geared towards children. Children adored Gloria and imitated her provocative style. But behind the scenes, Trevi's public image continued to soar. She released albums like Me Siento Tan Sola, which means I feel so lonely, Si Me Llevas Contigo, which means if you take me with you, and starred in movies like Zapatos Viejos or Old Shoes. And her television appearances became a must-watch event. Tabloids began whispering. By the mid-90s, journalists noted the unusually large number of teenage girls traveling with Andrade and Gloria. When asked in interviews, Gloria would brush off the questions, insisting they were just dancers, trainees, or, quote, chicas con sueños, girls with dreams. Still, the rumors didn't stop. Some parents began to come forward, claiming they couldn't reach their daughters after sending them to Andrade's academy. Others alleged the girls had been brainwashed. But the star power of Gloria Trevi was so overwhelming at the time that few wanted to believe the darker allegations. As told by the victims, it is alleged that both Gloria and Maria Voquitas endured some form of this treatment as well, but often shifting to Sergio's right hands when needed. When Gloria was alleged to have been instrumental in the abuse, it is worthy to note she too may have been a victim, abused and manipulated. In an odd instance of Gloria's career, one of the music videos for her song El Recuento de los Daños, directed by Sergio Andrade nonetheless, it features a young Gloria acting out a seemingly random string of events. Depicted in the music video is a young girl being abducted by her captor, raised and abused by him. Gloria plays herself and strangely falls in love with her captor in the video. In my opinion, this was a small cry for help and maybe a real or realistic portrayal of her life, making her a victim of Sergio Andrade as well. In the public eye, Gloria was Mexico's rock rebel, still, selling out arenas and topping charts. Behind closed doors, the foundation of her career, her partnership with Sergio Andrade, was becoming the center of one of the most shocking scandals Latin America would ever see. By the late 1990s, the perfect pop facade around Gloria Trevi and Sergio Andrade began to crack. For years, whispers had circulated. Rumors about young girls living with the producer, strict rules, and odd disappearances. But in 1998, the whispers turned into a scream. That year, Karina Yapur, one of Andrade's proteges, vanished from her family's life. She had joined the so-called, quote, talent training program when she was just 12 years old. Her parents were told she would be training in singing and acting, that she was chasing a dream. But soon after, the family received a chilling phone call. Authorities informed them that Karina, barely a teenager, had given birth at 14. Her newborn son had been discovered in a hospital, gravely ill and close to death. Karina herself was nowhere to be found. For 6 agonizing months, her parents searched, torn between raising the infant grandson they never asked for and reporting their own daughter as a missing person. The story raised alarm bells. How had a child been put into this situation under Andrade's supervision? How much did Trevi know? By 1999, the first cracks widened to a full-blown investigation. Mexican authorities began to dig into the Gloria Trevi Andrade clan. More young women stepped forward with disturbing accounts: strict curfews, physical punishment, isolation from their families, and a culture of absolute obedience to Andrade. Allegations of sexual exploitation and manipulation painted a sinister picture of what had long been sold as talent development. The media latched on. Tabloid headlines screamed betrayal. For fans who had once seen Gloria as a symbol of rebellion and empowerment, the stories were unthinkable. How could a Mexican Madonna, the woman who sang about freedom and breaking rules, be tied to something so dark? By 2000, the scandal had exploded into one of the biggest pop culture stories in Latin American history. Arrest warrants were issued for Andrade, Gloria, and Maria. These accusations were damning: rape, corruption of minors, abduction, and child abuse. The trio went on the run. For more than a year, they evaded authorities, moving from country to country in South America. Tabloids cracked their every step, with headlines reading like a soap opera. Gloria and Sergio in Argentina? The clan seen in Brazil. Finally, in January 2000, after months of pursuit, Brazilian police captured Gloria Trevi, Sergio Andrade, and Maria Boquitas in Rio de Janeiro. The arrest was broadcast live across Mexico, with news helicopters circling and crowds gathering outside the police station. Inside the apartment, police found 8 young women, some underage and some pregnant, living under Andrade's control. Public opinion turned instantly and viciously. The same fans who once waved posters of Gloria now gathered in the streets, burning her photos and chanting insults. She was no longer considered the Mexican Madonna. She was branded a criminal, a traitor to the very young women she once claimed to inspire. Gloria Trevi, the rebellious pop star who had dominated Mexico's charts and shocked TV audiences with their wild performances, was now front-page news around the world, the face of one of the entertainment's most notorious scandals. But the scandal took an even stranger turn in 2001, when Gloria, still in custody in Brazil, announced that she was pregnant. She claimed that she had no idea how it happened. Tabloids exploded. The press dubbed it the Immaculate Conception, with some newspapers drawing wild comparisons to Madonna's Immaculate Collection album, splashing lurid headlines like "Virgin Birth Behind Bars." Eventually, DNA testing revealed the father was another person in the prison, a guard who allegedly had a relationship with her. But the surreal months of speculation cemented the scandal as larger than life. Gloria even gave birth in prison, but tragically, her infant daughter, Ana Delay, died under disputed circumstances, further fueling the public's obsession. Meanwhile, Karina Yapur, the former recruit whose disappearance in 1999 had helped trigger the investigation, published her own book, recounting her experiences with Andrade and Gloria. Like Eileen Hernandez before her, Karina described manipulation, coercion, and the destruction of young girls' lives under the so-called clan. These testimonies in print and on television kept the scandal alive after the arrests. In 2002, after 2 years in Brazilian custody, Gloria was extradited to Mexico to face charges of corruption of minors and child abuse. The trial was a media circus. Cameras followed her every move, with nightly talk shows debating, was she a victim, brainwashed by Andrade, or was she simply complicit in the crimes? For nearly 5 years, she remained behind bars as her case through the courts. Sergio Andrade was eventually convicted of corruption of minors and rape, receiving a long prison sentence. But in 2004, a Chihuahua judge acquitted Gloria Trevi of all charges, citing insufficient evidence. The ruling shocked many. Victims' families were outraged, while her fans celebrated her freedom as proof of her innocence. Almost after half a decade in prison, Gloria walked free. But she wasn't released. She was reborn. Within months, she would begin the next act of her career. On November 23, 2004, Gloria Trevi did the unthinkable. She walked out of a years-long legal nightmare and straight back into the studio. The album she brought with her, Como Nace el Universo, or How the Universe is Born, wasn't just a title. It was a mission statement. After half a decade defined by mugshots, headlines, and handcuffs, she decided her next image would be lyrics, chords, and a breath in a microphone. For the first time in her career, there was no Sergio Andrade in the booth. No one telling her what to wear, how to move, which taboo to break for ratings. The songs are steeped in confident and release. And you hear it immediately in the track En Miedo and confession that sounds like it was written at 3 a.m. when the body is exhausted but the spirit refuses to sleep. Much of this album was charted out exactly that way. Scribbled, smuggled through phone calls, verses saved in memory, melodies hummed into the void and recalled later in a studio in Mexico. And in the US commercially, the project overperformed expectations. Certifications in the US, a Billboard nod, and, more importantly, fans who showed up to hear her. The rollout leaned into intimacy and dignity. Sit-down interviews instead of shock TV. Concert halls instead of tabloid pressers. A wardrobe that said grown woman, not agent provocateur. The comeback narrative clicked because it didn't pretend that the past didn't happen. Rather, it reframed it. Gloria presented herself as a survivor who had learned hard lessons, a writer who had found her voice, and a pop star who still had something left to say. Live, the new era was stripped back, but pointed. She'd open with legacy hits to break the ice, then quiet the room for the newer material, building a confession crescendo that ended with catharsis. Arms lifted, lights warm, fans crying, singer grounded. In that space, a new Gloria took root. Less chaos, more control, less spectacle, more story. 2 years later, she denoted the song that would weld her name to resilience, Todos me miran, or Everyone Looks at Me. It arrived tucked into La Trayectoria, a live retrospective that doubled as a Reputation reboot. Where the album recapped her past, this track redefined her future. Todos me miran is a transformative narrative disguised as a dance record. The first verse talks about judgment, gossip, and shame, while the chorus talks about glitter and dress sparkles, the eye contact hardens. The production is high camp. Big synths, stomping beat, key changes that are absolutely deliberate. If the old Gloria was provocative, the new Gloria brought permission. Permission to be loud, queer, flamboyant, unapologetic, and seen. The music video is a masterclass in visuals, grayscale to color, plain to glam, downcast to chin up. Stylistically, it borrows from drag pageantry and old-school diva tropes and turns them into armor. Clubs claimed it first. Pride parades adopted it next. And the mainstream followed. An entire community hearing its reflection in a pop star who had also been mocked, judged, and written off. At the award show at Premios Lo Nuestro 2007, she opened with the crystallized version of that metamorphosis. Mirrors, sequins, hair as a weapon. When the cameras pulled back and the crowd took the chorus, you realized something had shifted. The performance wasn't a comeback story anymore. This was canonized by the chorus. By 2011, Gloria Trevi had survived scandal, prison, and a tentative comeback. But this moment, her self-titled album Gloria, released on March 22, 2011, was the first time she let herself breathe. Naming the record after herself was deliberate. After decades of being branded everything from the Mexican Madonna to the Fallen Idol, she wanted her name to stand alone. Just Gloria. The songs read almost like a diary entry set to pop arrangements. She co-wrote most of it, and you can tell. There's a directness in the lyrics that feels lived in. Me río de ti, or I Laugh at You, became the standout single at this album. A sarcastic grin to set a pulsing beat, mocking those who have mocked her. Then there's the single Vestida de Azúcar, or Dressed in Sugar, one of the most elegant ballads, a sugary poison metaphor for the addictive pull of love. Both singles showed a pop star who could still throw emotional punches, but now she didn't have to scream them across the room. Musically, the album marked a shift. Gone were the deliberate, chaotic edges of her earlier persona. In their place, cleaner guitars, brighter piano lines, airier production. It was like someone had opened a window after a storm. Critics noted how much more adult it felt. Gloria was not chasing shock anymore. She was building a sustained artistry. But this wasn't just a musical pivot. On stage, Gloria was navigating a complicated life. She was now a mother of 3, balancing touring and raising children. She was also still fighting the shadowy figures of her past. Interviews from this time showed her trying to split the difference. She'd smile through questions about motherhood and music, but when reporters pushed on Sergio Andrade or the Clan, her tone hardened. She insisted that her survival story was still being misunderstood, but also admitted that music was her therapy. Controversy didn't vanish in this period either. Around the release of Gloria, critics debated whether audiences should separate the artist from her scandal. Feminist groups were split. Some hailed her as a symbol of resilience. Others saw her as a continued fame and proof of Mexico's double standards in handling abuse cases. Tabloids loved it, however, and oftentimes making headlines like "Gloria triumphs amongst the shadows." The visuals matched her tone. Precision over shock. Her music videos told many stories with clear emotional arcs. Wardrobe choices leaned towards symbolism. Black lace for heartbreak. Bursts of red for empowerment. Whites and pastels when she wanted to show fragility. On stage, she started weaving in confessional interludes. Moments between big hits where she'd sit, almost like at a kitchen table, and talk directly to the audience about strength, survival, and love. These unscripted moments deepened the bond. Audiences felt trusted, she felt believed, and the new songs landed harder. Commercially, Gloria charted as well in Mexico and across Latin America, though not quite at the explosive levels of Una Rosa Blue. But that wasn't her mission. She wasn't trying to shock or conquer. This album was designed to prove that she could still stand, tell her story, and own her own name without the circus. In that way, Gloria worked. It repositioned her not as the scandalized pop rebel of the 90s, nor the survivor crawling her way back in 2004, but as an artist who had finally earned the right to narrate her own story. If there was ever a pairing that seemed impossible, it was this. Gloria Trevi and Alejandra Guzman, Mexico's 2 wildest divas of the 90s, sharing a stage. For years, the media had fueled their rivalry. Gloria was the pop provocateur, the girl with ripped tights and glitter in her hair. Alejandra was the rockera royalty, daughter of Silvia Pinal and Enrique Guzman, known for their raspy growl and unapologetic voices. They were cast as opposites, Trevi the chaos, Guzman the fire. And yet, in 2017, it happened, the Versus World Tour. This wasn't a concert, it was a cultural event. For decades, both women had carried the weight of tabloid wars, scandals, and reinventions. Guzman had survived drug scandals, surgeries gone wrong, and years of public scrutiny. Trevi had survived prison, trials, and the most infamous scandal in Mexican pop culture. To see them just not coexist but collaborate was symbolic. Mexico's bad girls had grown up, but they hadn't mellowed out. The Versus Tour wasn't small either. It launched with over 30 sold-out arena shows across Mexico, the US, and Latin America. And demand kept growing. At the box office, it rivaled the biggest Latin pop tours of the decade. The energy was electric because the format was theatrical. The set list was billed like a boxing match. Gloria would come out swinging with a run of her hits, then Alejandra would counterpunch with hers. Fans cheered like it was a duel, a battle of 2 legacies. And then, the knockout moment, the duets. Songs like Todos Me Miran and Tenerme Bella mashed together, their voices clashing and blending, creating a kind of pop-rock spectacle that no one else could deliver. The marketing leaned into this rivalry turned sisterhood narrative. Posters literally showed them back to back like fighters. The tagline versus turning conflict into spectacle. But inside the arenas, what fans witnessed wasn't rivalry, rather a sisterhood forged in survival. On stage, they teased each other, played up the drama, but also embraced, laughed, and reminded audiences that they weren't enemies. They were mirror images of each other's resilience. For Gloria, the tour did more than just bring in millions. It repositioned her within the Mexican pop's larger story. For years, she had been framed primarily against her scandal, as if her career wouldn't be separate from Andrade. But Versus reframed her narrative. She wasn't a survivor of her own story. She was also part of a dynasty, sharing equal footing with Alejandra Guzman, one of Mexico's most respected rock icons. And for her fans, Versus was one of the best. It was the 1990s reimagined, but without the shame, the scandal, or the sense of unfinished business. For a few hours each night, Gloria Trevi and Alejandra Guzman stood side by side, commanding the stage, proving that Mexico's most notorious divas were still, decades later, the country's most powerful. So, who is Gloria Trevi? That depends on who you ask. For her fans, she's nothing short of a feminist icon. The woman who stormed into Mexico's conservative pop scene with ripped tights, tangled hair, and a voice that screamed rebellion. For the LGBTQ+ community, she's a heroine, the face of Todos Me Miran, a song that became more than a comeback single, rather a declaration of survival, embraced as an anthem for pride and defiance around the world. For millions of women, especially in Mexico and Latin America, she's a symbol of resilience, proof that you can be dragged through the mud, mocked, jailed, written off, and still rise again. But there's another side. To her critics, Gloria Trevi represents the opposite of empowerment. A woman who was complicit in one of the darkest scandals in Latin pop history. Even if Andrade was the mastermind, detractors argue she was no innocent. That while she reinvented herself, many of the women from the so-called clan never got the same chance. For them, Gloria's story is not a triumph, but a cautionary tale about accountability, power, and survival in an industry built on exploitation. And yet, her influence is still undeniable. Few stars in the industry of Latin music have lived a career arc this dramatic. To rise, fall, and rise again, selling millions of records in the process. Decades after her 1989 debut, she's still filling arenas. Not nostalgia venues, but massive stages, and her songs remain staples across generations. Gloria Trevi is the Mexican Madonna, but she's also more complicated than that. She's the rebel who refused to play by the rules. She's the scapegoat who carried the weight of an industry's sins. She's the survivor who rebuilt herself in real time and in front of cameras, critics, and a country that alternates between adoration and suspicion. And maybe that's why she endures, because Gloria Trevi isn't just a singer. She's a mirror of Mexican pop culture itself. Messy, glamorous, scandalous, resilient, and always larger than life. Her story remains as one of the most dramatic in all of Latin music. And whether you see her as a villain, a victim, or a heroine, one thing is certain: you cannot tell the story of Latin pop without Gloria Trevi. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the story of Gloria Trevi. If you liked this video, feel free to drop a like and subscribe, and leave a comment about your most interesting part about this video or something that you learned that maybe you didn't know beforehand. If you have any suggestions for any future videos or people that you want me to cover, leave a comment down below and I might just do it. Thank you so much.